At 2:13 a.m., Keanu Reeves answered a call from a voice he hadn't heard in 25 years. His high school girlfriend, sobbing from a hospital. "My daughter is dying," she said, "and you're the only one who can save her." Then came 6 words that shattered his world. "Keanu, she's your daughter too." Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Keanu Reeves sat alone in his Los Angeles apartment, the city lights casting a soft glow through the glass walls. The world outside was still, quiet, and indifferent. Inside, the only sound was the faint scratch of his pen against a leather-bound journal. He wrote every night. Small reflections, pieces of thoughts he couldn't say out loud. Moments he didn't want to forget. It was something he'd started doing years ago, a way to keep track of time in a life that often felt like it was speeding past. Tonight, the words came slowly. His hand paused over the page. Something inside him felt unsettled, like the air just before a thunderstorm. He looked at the clock. It was 2:13 a.m. He sighed and leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes for a moment. Then his phone buzzed. He opened his eyes slowly. At this hour, most calls were emergencies. He reached for the phone, expecting it to be his assistant with a scheduling issue, or maybe one of his friends stuck in a different time zone. The screen showed a name he didn't recognize. The number was from Chicago. His finger hovered over the green icon. He answered, "Keanu." The voice was soft, trembling, faint, like it was reaching through years of silence. "This is Emily Ramirez." Huh. The pen slipped from his fingers. He sat up. Emily Ramirez. That name crashed through him like a sudden wave. He hadn't heard it in decades, not since he was a young man trying to make his way as an actor in Toronto. They'd been inseparable back then. 2 dreamers walking cold Canadian streets, talking about movies, art, the future. She took his first real headshots. She believed in him before anyone else did. He swallowed hard. "Emily, I'm so sorry for calling you like this. I didn't know who else to turn to." Her voice cracked on the last word. Keanu stood, the phone pressed tightly to his ear. "It's okay, just... What's going on?" "I'm calling from Mercy Hospital in Chicago," she said. "It's my daughter Sophia. She's 17, and she's dying." The room fell away. He gripped the back of the chair to steady himself. "Keanu has a rare, aggressive strain of leukemia. The doctors say there's one chance. A new treatment, something experimental. It's not covered by insurance, and the cost? It's $2.5 million. Keanu, I've tried everything. I've sold my house, maxed every credit card, begged for donations, but it's not enough. And there's no time left." She was crying now, barely holding herself together. "I'm not calling because I expect anything. I'm calling because I don't know what else to do. Please? I didn't know who else would even pick up." Keanu closed his eyes. "I'll take care of it," he said. "Whatever it costs, I'll take care of it. Just tell me what she needs." The silence on the other end was thick. Then, a soft sob. "Thank you," Emily whispered. "You have no idea what this means." But what she said next shattered everything. "Keanu, she's your daughter." For a full 5 seconds, Keanu didn't move. His breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded like it was trying to escape his chest. "What did you say?" Emily didn't repeat it immediately. The line went quiet except for the hum of hospital equipment in the background. When her voice returned, it was softer, more fragile. "Sophia. She's your daughter, yours and mine." He staggered back, dropping into the armchair. The journal lay open on the table, the half-written sentence now meaningless. "You never told me." "I wanted to," Emily said quickly. "I tried. But after you left for Los Angeles, everything changed. I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after you were gone. I didn't know how to reach you. You weren't famous yet, and you didn't have an agent I could contact. Your number had changed. Your letters stopped coming. I wrote for months, Keanu said. I thought you moved on, that you didn't want to talk to me. I didn't move on, she whispered. I moved cities. My mom got sick and we had to leave Toronto. I was 18, scared and pregnant. I didn't even know how to start over. And then, life just kept happening. I always meant to find you, but when I saw you on magazine covers years later, it felt too late. He pressed his fingers to his temple, trying to think. You should have told me. I know. I've lived with that guilt every single day. But when I saw Sophia getting worse and the doctors said there was nothing left, I couldn't let her die without knowing everything. I had to try. Keanu stood up and paced the room, trying to absorb the truth. He had a daughter. A 17-year-old daughter. He'd missed her first words, her first day of school, her heartbreaks, her milestones. He'd missed her life. And now she was dying. What's she like? He asked. Emily hesitated, then smiled faintly through her tears. She's brilliant, kind, fiercely independent. She wants to be a writer. She's tough, like she's always had something to prove. And she has your eyes. He sank to the floor, unable to stay upright under the weight of it all. I'm coming, he said. Keanu? I'm coming to Chicago, tonight. I want to see her. I want to help her. I want to know her. Emily's breath caught. She doesn't know yet. She doesn't know who her real father is. I told her once that he was an artist who lived far away. I'll tell her myself. They sat in silence. Two voices connected by a broken past and a fragile thread of hope. Then Keanu ended the call, packed a bag, and made one call to his pilot. To Chicago, tonight. No delay. The plane lifted off from Burbank Airport just before 4 a.m. The night sky was dark, stretching endlessly over the Midwest like a curtain waiting to fall. Keanu stared out the window, but saw nothing. His thoughts were stuck somewhere in 1998, the last year he remembered, holding Emily's hand. His mind wouldn't stop replaying her voice. Sophia is your daughter. It didn't feel real. How could it be real? And yet every part of him knew it was. The age matched. The silence from Emily suddenly made sense. The years of wondering why she disappeared, all of it came into focus in that one unbearable moment. The pilot's voice broke through the quiet cabin. We'll be landing in Chicago just after sunrise. Keanu nodded absently and returned to the seat. He pulled the journal from his bag, opened to a fresh page, and stared at the empty lines. Then he wrote 4 words. I have a daughter. He stared at them until they blurred. The moment the wheels hit the runway, he was moving. No public airport. No paparazzi. A car was waiting at a private terminal. He gave the driver the address to Mercy Hospital and sat silently in the back seat, watching the city wake up. Coffee shops flicked on lights. Joggers passed, bundled in early spring windbreakers. A mother pushed a stroller across a quiet intersection. His heart twisted. At 6:02 a.m., he stepped through the hospital doors. The antiseptic air hit him hard. He asked for the pediatric oncology wing. The nurse gave him the room number and buzzed him in. His steps echoed against the linoleum floor. Room 312. He stopped outside the door. Through the window, he saw her. Sophia was asleep in a hospital bed, her hair thin from treatment, a soft blanket tucked around her. An IV drip stood like a sentinel beside her. Machines beeped quietly. She looked peaceful and fragile. In the chair next to her sat Emily. She looked up. Their eyes met for the first time in 25 years. She stood slowly and opened the door, stepping into the hallway. She looked tired, older, but still Emily. Still the girl who once told him his dreams were worth chasing. Keanu's voice came out low. She looks like you. She looks like you too, Emily whispered. She's been asleep most of the night. They gave her meds for the pain. He nodded, unable to look away from the glass. I told her someone important was coming today, Emily said. But I didn't say who. Keanu took a deep breath, his hand trembling as it rested on the doorframe. Then let's go meet my daughter. In the fall of 1987, Toronto felt like the edge of everything. Keanu was 23, still finding his way through the city's maze of snow-lined streets and smoky coffee shops. He lived in a cramped basement apartment off Spadina, where the windows barely let in light and the heater worked half the time. Every morning, he walked 3 blocks to the University Theater, his bag stuffed with play scripts and notebooks filled with half-finished monologues. He spent his afternoons shelving books at a dusty old shop that smelled of paper, rainwater, and dreams that had been written down and forgotten. It was quiet work, and he liked it that way. He could think, he could plan, and more than anything, he could dream of something beyond all this. He was a drama student, fresh from small stages and open casting calls, doing whatever it took to survive. Most of his classmates talked about safe careers, backup plans, and stability. But not Keanu. He wanted movies. He wanted characters that lived deep in their bones. He didn't want to play it safe. He wanted to burn for it. That's when he met her. It was a Thursday night at the University Arts Mixer. He didn't even want to go. He didn't drink, didn't like crowds, didn't know anyone who'd be there, but his roommate had pushed him out the door. The room was filled with laughter and smoke, musicians jamming in the corner, painters showing off canvases propped against the walls. Keanu stayed in the back, near a table of untouched cheese cubes, trying to blend in. Then someone tapped him on the shoulder. "You're the guy from Hamlet, right?" He turned. She stood there with a camera around her neck, a mop of dark curls tucked into a wool hat, and eyes that seemed to notice everything. "That was you last spring," she added. "You played Hamlet at the student theater." He nodded. "Yeah, that was me." She smiled. "You were really good. I'm Emily, photography major. I like faces that look like they have stories." Keanu didn't know what to say. He just smiled. She took that as an invitation to sit down next to him. They talked for 3 hours. She told him about how she got into photography when her father bought her a disposable camera for her 8th birthday, how she loved capturing moments that people missed, how she wanted to photograph war zones one day, not for violence, but to document hope in the worst places. He told her about his love for stories, how his mother used to read him Shakespeare, and how he found comfort in pretending to be someone else. By the end of the night, they were the only 2 people left in the room. Emily looked at him and said, "You have the kind of face that could change everything, but only if someone believes in you first." And somehow, with just those words, she became the first person who really did. The weeks that followed felt like something out of a film. Emily started showing up to Keanu's rehearsals, camera in hand, watching from the back row. She'd wait until the stage emptied and then take his photo. Between the lines, in the shadows, when his guard was down. He'd look at the prints she gave him days later and barely recognize himself. She captured things he didn't know he was showing. She asked him to model for one of her student projects. It was a black and white series titled Still Becoming. He laughed when he heard it. But she didn't smile. "You are still becoming," she told him. "Most people stop. You haven't." They spent hours walking through the snowy sidewalks of Kensington Market, stopping at bookstores and old diners that played jazz through the speakers. She always ordered tea with lemon. He always paid, even when he was broke. It became their rhythm. They spoke in dreams, talked about one day, imagined a future that didn't quite exist yet. Keanu had never been in a relationship that felt so safe. Not boring, not tame, just honest. No games, no performance. Just 2 people trying to figure out what it meant to be seen. One night they were sitting in a coffee shop long after it had closed. The owner had forgotten about them and left the lights on. Keanu looked at her across the table and said, "I don't know if I'm ever going to make it. Acting, I mean. It feels like there are a million people better than me." Emily reached across and took his hand. "Maybe there are, but they don't have your heart. That's what matters." It was the first time someone had ever said that to him. That night, she took his first professional headshots. Natural light, no makeup, no pretense. Just him, sitting on a bench in the snow, looking like he belonged somewhere else and nowhere at all. Those photos would later get him his first audition in the States, but neither of them knew that then. What they did know was that they were falling in love. It wasn't a loud kind of love. There were no grand gestures or declarations. Just quiet mornings with cold fingers wrapped around coffee mugs. Just long walks where she would photograph alley murals while he recited lines from obscure plays. They were young, they were scared, but somehow they made each other feel less alone. In February, everything changed. Keanu landed a role, a small part in an American indie film. It shot in Los Angeles. 3 months. It paid just enough to make it worth the risk. He told Emily the night he got the call. She smiled. "This is it." "I think so. You have to go." He didn't want to leave her, but he knew if he didn't take the leap now, he might never get another chance. So they started counting down the days. The final night before his flight, the city was blanketed in fresh snow. Keanu and Emily sat on a bench outside the bookstore where he used to work. Her camera was tucked in her bag, forgotten for once. He didn't want any more photos. He wanted to remember this moment exactly as it was. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" "Letters. One for every week you're gone. I wrote them ahead of time." He stared at her, stunned. "You always say you're terrible at remembering to write," she said. "So I figured I'd help you stay ahead." He laughed, blinking away the tears. "That's unfair. Now I have to top that." "You don't have to top anything. Just go be who you're supposed to be." He wanted to tell her he loved her. He thought about it all night. At the airport, it got harder to breathe. His suitcase was too light. His hands too empty. Her arms wrapped around him like she was trying to hold together everything that was about to break. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "Promise?" "Every week. I'll write too. You'll get tired of hearing from me." "I won't." When they called his flight, he stepped into the security line, then turned back one last time. She stood by the departure doors, hands in her coat pockets, snow gathering in her curls. She didn't wave, she just watched. He never saw her again. For months, he wrote letters, long ones, some filled with excitement, others with exhaustion. He mailed them every Friday. And slowly, the silence grew. The replies never came. The phone calls went unanswered. By summer, he stopped trying. She was gone. He told himself she'd moved on. Maybe met someone else. Maybe transferred schools. Maybe she just didn't want to be tied to a struggling actor on another coast. And so he buried it. He booked more auditions, got more roles, found himself on sets with people he never thought he'd meet. His name started getting passed around casting rooms. His face started showing up on screens. He carried her in the corners of his memory, in the old headshots she once took, in the lines she wrote in those envelopes that he kept for years. But now, standing in a hospital hallway decades later, he realized the story was never finished. Emily hadn't moved on. She'd moved away. She'd moved quietly. And she had carried a secret that changed everything. A 17-year-old girl named Sophia, their daughter. And Keanu hadn't just missed a love he once knew. He had missed a life he helped create. Now, he had one chance to make it right. The early morning light had just started creeping through the windows of Mercy Hospital when Keanu Reeves stepped into the quiet corridor outside room 312. Everything was muted. The footsteps of nurses, the hum of machines, even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. He stood for a moment, unsure if he was ready to face what waited on the other side of the glass. Down the hall, a woman rose from a metal chair near the vending machines. Emily. She looked older now, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and deep lines around her eyes. But the way she moved, measured, calm, was the same. And when she saw him, she didn't speak at first. She just looked at him like she was bracing for the weight of the years between them to land all at once. Keanu walked toward her slowly. Neither of them knew exactly how to start. She offered a soft, tired smile. "You came." He nodded. "Of course." Emily looked down, folding her arms like she was holding herself together. "I wasn't sure you would after what I told you." Keanu's voice was quiet. "I had to." She motioned to a bench by the window and they sat down together. The city stirred just outside. But in here, the moment belonged to them. "I owe you an explanation," she said. Keanu didn't answer. He just waited. "I found out I was pregnant about 6 weeks after you left for California," she began. "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have my mom anymore. My dad had already passed. I had no family, no real support, just this tiny life inside me and no idea how to reach you." She looked over at him, then away. "I tried writing. I sent 3 letters. They all came back marked undeliverable. Then I called the only number I had, but it was disconnected. You were gone, and I didn't know anyone else in your life." Keanu frowned, his hands tightening in his lap. "I changed apartments, changed numbers, but I wrote to you for months. I never heard back. I thought you didn't want to talk to me." Emily shook her head slowly. "I didn't move on. I moved into survival mode. I transferred schools, took night classes, worked 2 jobs. I carried Sophia alone, gave birth to her in a clinic in Scarborough, and from the moment I held her, I knew I had to protect her, even if it meant doing it without you." Keanu stared at the floor, feeling the years rush back like water through a broken dam. "You should have told me," he whispered. "I know," she said. "I've lived with that every single day." Keanu looked up at her, his voice strained. 17 years. I didn't even know she existed." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them quickly, trying to stay composed. "I wanted to reach out so many times, but life, it never made space for it. I was always behind on rent, always hustling to make sure Sophia had what she needed. I thought if I contacted you when you were becoming famous, it would look like I wanted something from you. I didn't want you to think that. I would have helped," Keanu said, shaking his head. "I would have been there. I missed her entire childhood." Emily swallowed hard. "I raised her to be strong. She doesn't depend on anyone. She's had a good life, Keanu. Not easy, but good. She's smart, kind, funny, but she never knew the truth." He turned toward her. "What did you tell her?" Emily exhaled. "That her father was someone I met when I was young, that he left when I found out I was pregnant. I didn't give her a name. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell her everything either. I didn't want her to grow up hating you." "Does she?" he asked quietly. "She has questions, but she keeps most of them to herself. She's never really pushed. She tells people she's fine not knowing, but I can see it. Every time she looks in the mirror. Every time she asks where her eyes came from, or why she loves music when I never played anything in the house." Keanu's throat tightened. "She made your heart," Emily said. "She feels everything. But she never lets it show." "That's you." He leaned back, blinking rapidly. The guilt was settling in deep now, and nothing could shake it. "Why now?" he asked. "Why tell me now?" Emily's voice cracked. "Because she's dying?" There was no anger in her tone. Just despair. A hollow truth that neither of them could outrun. "I couldn't let her leave this world without ever knowing who she really is," she continued. "And I couldn't keep that from you. Not anymore." Keanu's hands trembled. He didn't know what to say. Every part of him ached. "I missed so much." "You didn't choose to," she said. "And I didn't give you the chance." That's on me." They sat in silence, the hum of the hospital reminding them that time was not something they could afford to waste. Finally, Keanu turned to her again. "I want to see her." Emily's expression changed. A flicker of fear passed through her face. "She doesn't know who you are. She just thinks you're a kind man helping with the treatment. I didn't tell her the truth yet. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I didn't want to give her false hope." "Then let me give her real hope," Keanu said. Emily hesitated. "She's been through so much," she said. "The chemo, the pain, the fatigue. She's strong, but this disease has taken everything from her. Her hair, her energy, her plans for college. I'm scared that introducing something this big, someone this big, might break her." Keanu nodded slowly, trying to understand. He had no right to push, but he couldn't walk away either. "I won't overwhelm her," he said gently. "I'll just sit with her, talk, be whoever she needs me to be." Emily looked away, struggling with the decision. "She's in room 312. She's asleep right now. The doctors gave her something for the nausea. Then I'll wait until she wakes." Emily looked back at him, eyes glistening. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure about anything." She nodded slowly. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled the visitor's pass from her coat pocket. "I told the nurses you might be coming," she said. "They'll let you in." Keanu stood. His heart was pounding, the kind of nervous he hadn't felt since he stepped on his first stage. Emily stood too, but didn't follow him. "Wait," she said suddenly. "Before you go in, there's one more thing." He turned back. "She's going to ask you where you've been," Emily said, "and I know you'll want to explain. But please, don't make it about regret. She doesn't need to carry that. She's already carrying too much." He looked at her for a long time. "I'll tell her I'm here now, and that I'm not going anywhere." Emily nodded. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That's all she needs." With the badge clipped to his shirt and his chest rising with every anxious breath, Keanu walked down the hall. The door to room 312 stood slightly ajar. He paused outside it, staring in at the girl who was half his blood, all of his heart, and until yesterday, a complete stranger. Sophia lay asleep, her face pale but peaceful. The room was decorated with soft lights, faded Polaroids, and hand-drawn sketches taped to the wall. Some of them looked like self-portraits, others like scenes from a book she must have imagined. There were books stacked on the nightstand, poetry, science fiction. A notebook lay open, with a pen resting across the pages. He stepped inside slowly and sat in the chair beside her bed. For a long time, he just watched her breathe. Then, without saying a word, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his journal, and placed it gently on the table. He was ready. She would wake soon, and when she did, he would be there. The gentle beeping of the monitors filled the hospital room with a steady rhythm, like a distant metronome. The lights were dimmed to keep things calm, but morning sunlight began to edge through the blinds. Keanu sat quietly in the chair beside Sophia's bed, watching her sleep, his fingers lightly resting on the edge of her blanket. Sophia stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered before her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft light. She blinked a few times, looked around the room, then spotted him. At first, her expression didn't change. She simply stared. Her eyes were a light brown, the same color as his mother's. She blinked again, then whispered, You're Keanu Reeves." He smiled gently. "Hi." She looked confused. Her voice was hoarse from sleep and illness, but clear enough to carry her curiosity. "The actor?" He nodded. "Yes." She squinted. "Why are you here?" He hesitated, then glanced at the door. Emily had stepped in quietly a few moments earlier and now stood by the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were locked on him, silently encouraging him to speak. Keanu turned back to Sophia. "That's a good question," he said softly. I'm not just here as that guy from the movies. Sophia's lips twitched in confusion. What do you mean? Keanu took a breath. I'm also something else. She tilted her head slightly, her brows furrowing. What? He looked back at Emily again. She gave him the smallest nod. He turned back to Sophia, his voice a little unsteady. I'm your dad. The room fell silent. Sophia didn't react immediately. Her eyes dropped, staring at the blanket covering her legs. Her fingers twisted the edge of the fabric slowly. I thought he left, she said quietly. When I was a baby. Keanu felt something in his chest shift. I didn't know you existed, he said, his voice rough but steady. Not until yesterday. Sophia looked up, meeting his eyes. There was a storm behind her quiet expression, but no tears, no outburst. Just a slow, piercing kind of pain that had been sitting there for years. Mom told me he wasn't around, that he didn't want to be. Keanu leaned forward slightly. I would have wanted to be. I wasn't given that chance. And I'm sorry. For all of it. She looked down again. It's weird. Everyone always asks about my dad, and I never had an answer. I stopped wondering after a while. It hurt less. Keanu didn't speak. He let her words land fully. Then she looked up again. Her voice was calm. So, now what? He swallowed. Now I stay, if you'll let me. There was a pause. Then she said, then don't leave. The air in the room shifted. Keanu felt it in the way her eyes softened just slightly, in the way her shoulders, though still slumped from pain, relaxed. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't cried, but that one sentence, then don't leave, said more than all of that combined. I won't, Keanu said. Not ever again. Sophia looked at him, then over at her mother. Emily stepped into the room more fully now, her hands still folded in front of her, her face unreadable but tense with emotion. For years, she had protected her daughter from a truth she wasn't sure how to tell. Now it was out, and she had to watch the pieces rearrange in real time. Sophia turned back to Keanu. Did you know right away? He nodded slowly. When your mom called me yesterday, she didn't tell me at first. I offered to help, not knowing. Then she told me the truth, and everything changed. Sophia shifted in her bed. Her breathing was a little shallow, the oxygen tubes in her nose making soft sounds as she moved. I thought I was hallucinating, she said, when I woke up and saw you. Like maybe they gave me too much morphine or something. Keanu smiled. Nope, I'm really here. I even brought my journal. He nodded toward the small leather-bound book on the table beside her. I write in it almost every day. I thought maybe you'd want to read a few pages sometime. Or maybe write in it with me. Sophia stared at the journal for a moment. I keep one too, she said quietly. Well, when I have the energy, I write poems, stories. Some are kind of weird. Weird is good, Keanu said. Weird usually means honest. She cracked the faintest smile. There was a knock on the door. A nurse peeked in. Sorry, I just need to check vitals. Sophia nodded, and the nurse entered the room, pulling up a monitor on wheels. She worked efficiently, checking Sophia's pulse, temperature, and adjusting one of the IV lines. Through it all, Sophia barely looked up. Keanu stayed seated, silent, just watching. It felt surreal to be there. In this space he should have known for 17 years, but was only entering now. When the nurse finished, she gave Sophia's hand a gentle pat and smiled at Keanu on her way out. She's strong, she whispered. Keanu nodded. Sophia turned to him once the door closed. Can I ask you something? Of course. Now, I mean, if you didn't know about me, how did you find out? Keanu looked at her carefully. Because your mom finally told me. She was scared, and she didn't know how to reach me before. But when she realized you might not have much time, she picked up the phone." Sophia looked away. "I guess she finally ran out of secrets," she whispered. Keanu leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, voice steady but full of feeling. "Everyone has reasons for the choices they make, but none of that changes what I want now." Sophia looked back at him. Her face was paler than before, her energy clearly fading, but her eyes were still alert, still watching him closely. "What do you want?" she asked. He met her gaze. "I want to be here for you, however you'll let me. I want to sit with you, talk to you, learn everything I've missed. I want to help you fight. I want to believe in every day that we still have." She blinked, then nodded slightly. "That sounds like a lot. It's the least I can do." There was a long pause, quiet but not uncomfortable. Sophia looked over at the photos taped to her wall. There were snapshots of her with Emily, a few school friends, a picture of her holding a camera, grinning in the sunlight. One photo, slightly faded, showed her as a little girl in a Halloween costume, dressed as a robot with cardboard arms and aluminum foil boots. Keanu smiled at it. "That one," he said, pointing. "Was that your idea?" "Yeah," she said. "I wanted to be a robot with a heart." He chuckled. "That's perfect. I kept that one because I made the costume myself," she added. "Mom helped a little, but it was my idea." "I wish I could have seen that in person," Keanu said. "I would have clapped louder than anyone." Sophia turned back to him. Her voice came out softer now. "So what do we do now?" Keanu looked at her, then slowly reached for her hand. She let him take it. "We do today," he said. "We tell the truth. We stay close. We fight this, together." Her grip tightened just slightly. "And tomorrow?" she asked. "We do that one too, when we get there." Sophia nodded again. Her eyes were glistening now, but no tears fell. She just squeezed his hand again and said, "Okay." Emily, still standing quietly by the door, finally stepped into the light. Her eyes were red but calm. "I'll give you two some time," she said softly. Sophia turned to her. "Stay, Mom." Emily smiled. "I'll stay." And so they did. The three of them sat together in that hospital room. A family. New, broken, mending. Nothing about it was easy. But for the first time in a long time, there was no hiding, no pretending. Just truth. And for the first time since she'd been admitted, Sophia fell asleep holding both her parents' hands. The next morning came quickly. Keanu had barely slept, his mind racing through every memory, every moment he'd missed, and every second he had left to fix what he could. By 7, he was seated beside Emily in a small consultation room down the hall from Sophia's unit. A warm cup of untouched coffee sat in front of her. She was staring at it like it might offer answers if she waited long enough. The door opened, and Dr. Ana Hernandez stepped inside. Her expression calm but weary. She was in her early 50s, with graying hair pulled into a bun, and eyes that had seen too many families walk this same road. Emily stood to greet her. Keanu nodded quietly. "I wanted to go over the latest results," Dr. Hernandez said as she sat. "Sophia's numbers have dropped again. Her white blood cell count is critically low. The last round of chemo has stopped working. We've reached the point where traditional therapies won't buy us more time." Keanu leaned forward. "What about experimental options?" Dr. Hernandez gave a small sigh, then pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printed reports, scans, and a single stapled document. "There's one option we've discussed before," she said, glancing at Emily. "A gene-edited therapy developed in Munich. It's extremely rare, still in trial stages. So far, only 5 patients have received it globally, all in Europe." Emily nodded slowly. "You told me about this a year ago. You said it was too far off, too expensive, too risky." "It still is," Dr. Hernandez said gently. "It requires approval, import logistics, and a specialist to administer it. Our hospital isn't set up for that level of protocol. Plus, the cost. It's not covered by insurance. Between the drug, transport, licensing, and post-treatment care, we're talking close to $2.5 million. Keanu didn't blink. Then we'll get it, whatever it takes. Emily looked at him, stunned. Keanu? He turned to her. No, let me do this. She shook her head. I've raised money. Slowly, quietly. I've been working every side job I can find, selling photos online, tutoring students, saving every cent. I have about $300,000 set aside. I was hoping it might be enough to get her into a domestic trial, maybe next year. We don't have next year, Dr. Hernandez said softly. If we want this therapy, we need to move now. I can make some calls, but I'll be honest, without someone cutting through the red tape, it won't happen fast enough. Keanu stood. Then I'll be that someone. Emily rose too. Keanu, this isn't a movie. This isn't something you can just throw money at. He looked at her, calm but determined. This is my daughter. I didn't get to be there for her first steps, her first words, her birthdays. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to stand by while time runs out. Emily's eyes were full, but she didn't argue again. Not this time. Keanu stepped out into the hallway and pulled out his phone. He didn't pace, he didn't hesitate. He moved with quiet, focused urgency, the kind that didn't need dramatics to feel like a storm. Within minutes, he was speaking to his attorney, then his business manager, then a close contact at a private health logistics firm in Switzerland. He didn't bother asking if it was possible. He only asked how fast. Behind him, Emily remained in the consultation room with Dr. Hernandez. She kept glancing at the door, torn between awe and fear. Do you think this treatment will really work? She asked softly. Dr. Hernandez folded her hands. In the 5 patients who received it, 4 went into remission. But they were younger, early in diagnosis. Sophia's condition is more advanced. It's a gamble, a big one. Emily stared at her hands. We've lived in borrowed time for so long, I don't know how to hope without being afraid. You don't have to stop being afraid, the doctor said. You just have to let him help. Emily gave a bitter smile. That's harder than it sounds. 10 minutes later, Keanu returned, a small sheet of paper in his hand. He handed it to Dr. Hernandez. That's the contact for a medical flight team based in Frankfurt. They've worked with trial specialists before. I've already spoken with the head of their international treatment unit. They're waiting on the hospital's confirmation and Sophia's charts. Dr. Hernandez blinked, then took the paper. You did this in 10 minutes? I can do a lot in 10 minutes when it matters, Keanu said. Emily stood beside him, still absorbing it all. What do you need from me? He looked at her gently. Just say yes. She hesitated, her voice breaking. You know this will bring attention. People will talk. The press might get involved. I've kept Sophia out of all that her whole life. I'll keep her protected, he said. No cameras, no headlines. I won't let them turn her into a story. This isn't for them. She bit her lip. I just wanted her to have a normal life. Keanu's voice was soft but firm. Then let's fight to give her a future where that's still possible. Emily closed her eyes. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then she opened them again, met his gaze and nodded. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Within the hour, Keanu had chartered a private jet equipped for medical transport. He connected Dr. Hernandez with the German development team. Legal documents were signed, embassy paperwork initiated, and a specialist from Munich confirmed availability for a 72-hour window. Every minute mattered now. And for the first time in weeks, there was motion. Real, focused, unstoppable motion. Hope wasn't a vague idea anymore. It had a name, a flight number, and a countdown. That evening, as the sky turned deep blue over Chicago, Keanu stood by Sophia's window, watching her sleep. The monitors beside her beeped in gentle rhythm, their steady pulse a quiet reminder of what was at stake. He held a notebook in his hands, her notebook. She had let him read a few pages earlier, and her words still echoed in his mind. Some were poems. Some were letters to a father she thought had abandoned her. One ended with a line that cut him deeper than anything he'd felt in years. "If you ever come back, I hope you're kind." He closed the notebook slowly and looked over at her. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Her skin looked too pale under the hospital lights, but her face was peaceful. The door opened quietly. Emily entered, her arms crossed, face drawn. "The specialist is landing tomorrow afternoon," she said softly. "They'll bring the therapy directly from Munich. It'll be administered by Friday morning." Keanu nodded. "And the risks?" "Still high," she said. "Her immune system is almost gone. If the treatment fails, we won't get another chance." Keanu took a deep breath, grounding himself. "But there's a chance it won't fail." "Yes," Emily replied. "There's a chance." They stood in silence for a moment. "I told her," Emily said suddenly, "after you left the room earlier. I told her you were really her dad. I needed her to hear it from me before anyone else said it." Keanu turned to her. "How did she take it?" Emily said. "She already knew," Emily said, a faint smile flickering. "Said she figured it out when you stayed by her side longer than any stranger ever would. She said she felt it." His throat tightened. "I missed so much," he whispered. "But you're here now," she replied gently. Down the hall, the sound of another patient coughing broke the quiet. Somewhere in another room, a TV played the evening news. But inside room 312, time felt suspended. Asked me if I thought you'd stay," Emily said. "I told her the truth, that I've never seen anyone move mountains so fast in my life." Keanu looked over at Sophia again. "I will stay, whatever happens." Emily stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you." He nodded. "No. Thank you for raising her to be this strong, for never giving up on her." The room fell silent once more. They both watched Sophia sleep, knowing that when morning came, the fight would begin. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't fighting alone. The next morning started like any other in the hospital. Quiet, sterile, filled with the soft shuffle of nurses and the steady rhythm of machines. But outside, the storm had already begun. Keanu stepped out the side entrance, wearing a black hoodie pulled low and sunglasses that did little to hide his face. He hadn't planned to leave for long, just a quick walk to clear his head and check on a few details with his team. But as he reached the edge of the sidewalk, he heard a familiar sound. The click of a camera shutter. One flash. Then two. Then a voice. "Keanu, who's the girl?" He didn't stop walking. Didn't turn. But the damage was already done. By noon, it was everywhere. Photos of Keanu walking out of the children's oncology wing, his hand pressed to his chest like he was holding something in. A blurry shot through the glass of room 312. The caption read, "Keanu Reeves seen leaving Chicago hospital. Who is the teen girl?" 2 hours later, the headlines sharpened. Hollywood's most private star hiding secret daughter. Keanu's hidden family, what we know so far. Abandoned or protected, inside the shocking hospital visit. By the time the sun had started to dip, his phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls from his agent, messages from 3 major studios, a missed call from a journalist he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. He ignored them all. Inside the hospital, things grew louder. Emily heard voices in the hallway outside the pediatric wing. Nurses whispered. A staff member knocked gently on the door to warn them. "There's media at the main entrance," she said. "Security's been called. They're asking questions. Some are shouting about a paternity claim. I'm sorry, we didn't tell anyone." Keanu nodded without speaking. He turned to Sophia's bed. She had been awake for most of the day, groggy from medications, but alert enough to understand that something had shifted. Emily moved toward the blinds and peeked through the window. Flashes sparkled in the distance like fireflies. Cameras lined up outside the hospital fence. "They know," she said under her breath. Sophia's voice came from the bed, quiet but sharp. "Why do they care?" Emily turned. "Sweetheart." "Why do they care?" Sophia repeated. Her eyes were wide, panic starting to rise. "I didn't ask to be on the news. I didn't want anyone to know." Keanu stepped closer to her, sitting on the edge of the bed. "They don't matter," he said gently. "None of them matter. What matters is you. Just you." Sophia shook her head. "They're posting pictures of me, of us, like I'm some kind of secret scandal." Keanu reached for her hand, but her fingers pulled away. Her eyes were brimming with tears now. "I didn't ask for any of this." The hospital staff did their best to contain the situation. Security doubled at the elevators. Curtains were drawn tighter in Sophia's room. A private wing was suggested, but moving her was risky, and Keanu refused to let her be disturbed again. Emily was pacing now, clutching her phone, reading messages from friends and colleagues who had seen the headlines. She looked up at Keanu, her voice tense. "One of my students sent me a link. They're already digging through my background. Some tabloid just published a photo of Sophia from her 13th birthday. That wasn't even public." Keanu's jaw tightened. "They must have hacked something. Or someone I trusted shared it," she said bitterly. Across the room, Sophia had curled into herself, blanket up to her chin, her eyes red from crying. Her voice was hoarse. "People are saying I'm faking it, that I'm pretending to be sick just to get attention." Keanu stepped closer. "You don't need to read any of that. They baked me," she said. "I don't even have a real account, but someone used my name and made a fake one. People think I'm some spoiled kid. That you abandoned me and now you're trying to look good?" Keanu lowered to her eye level. "That's not who we are. None of it is real, Sophia. They don't know you. They never will." Emily crossed the room, her voice sharp now. "We need to shut this down. Issue a statement. Deny the paternity. Say it's fake." Keanu shook his head. "I won't lie. Not to protect myself." She stared at him. "But to protect her." He looked back at Sophia. Her breathing was shallow, her lips trembling. "The truth is, I didn't know she was mine. And now I do. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise because people want a headline." Emily's shoulders sagged. "Then they'll keep coming. This won't end with one article." Keanu's phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. "Let them come. I'll deal with them." The door creaked open and Dr. Hernandez stepped in, visibly frustrated. "There are now protesters outside," she said, "and a news van parked half on the sidewalk. They're interviewing parents of other patients. It's starting to feel unsafe." Keanu stood. "I'll speak to security. And I'll call a friend in media relations." Quietly. Dr. Hernandez hesitated. "I know this wasn't your fault, but if things escalate, I may have to ask you to leave for Sophia's protection." Sophia sat up, voice shaking. "No, he stays." Everyone turned to her. She was pale, exhausted, trembling, but her eyes were clear. "Stays," she repeated. "I don't care what they say. He's the only reason I'm still here." Keanu sat back down beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'm not going anywhere." And he meant it. That night, as the city glowed under the pressure of headlines and speculation, Keanu stayed at the hospital. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He sat beside Sophia's bed, holding her hand when she let him, watching the subtle flicker of her eyelids as she drifted in and out of shallow rest. Emily had finally curled up on the cot in the corner, trying to get a few hours of sleep. Dr. Hernandez had adjusted the medication schedule to give Sophia as much comfort as possible before the treatment arrived the next morning. Keanu scrolled through his phone in the dim light. There were hundreds of messages now, some from journalists offering money, others from people he hadn't heard from in years, all with questions, advice, or judgment. But a few messages stood out. One from a fellow actor. Ignore the noise. What you're doing is right. Another from a fan. Your silence speaks louder than their headlines. Stay strong for her. And a third from an anonymous account with no profile picture at all. My daughter died of leukemia last year. You being there, it matters more than you know. He put the phone down and looked at Sophia again. Her eyes opened, just slightly. You still here? She whispered. I'm still here, he said softly. She smiled faintly. They're still outside? Probably, but they don't get to decide who you are, or who I am to you. She nodded, then looked toward the ceiling. I used to dream about this, about you, not as a movie star, just a man who wanted to know me. I want to know everything, he said. Every poem you've written, every book you've loved, every scar, every wish. Her lip trembled. I used to wish for this every year. On my birthday. On shooting stars. Even when I told myself to stop. He reached out and touched her shoulder gently. Then maybe, he said, your wish finally found its way. Outside, the news cycle continued spinning. New articles dropped. New headlines were crafted with sharper hooks and more dramatic language. But inside room 312, none of that mattered. Keanu didn't post a statement. He didn't give an interview. He didn't leave. He stayed. He protected her the only way he knew how, by being present, by holding space, by refusing to let the noise of the world drown out the beating of her fragile, fierce heart. And when Sophia fell asleep again, this time with her hand resting in his, Keanu leaned back and whispered into the dark. No matter what they say out there, I'm not letting go. 3 days after the media storm began, Keanu stood behind a podium at a small conference room in downtown Chicago. There were no banners, no studio logos, no flashing lights. Just a beige wall, a microphone, and a man who had come to speak the truth, not as a celebrity, but as a father. He had debated doing this. Emily had warned against it. His team had begged him to let it blow over. But Sophia had looked at him the night before and said quietly, I just want them to stop guessing who I am. So now he stood in front of a dozen reporters, facing more cameras than he'd ever cared to. He cleared his throat, looked down at the note cards in his hands, then put them away. I wasn't planning to speak publicly, he began. But the last few days haven't been about plans. They've been about people. Real people. My daughter, her mother. And the truth, a few shutters clicked. The room was silent otherwise. I met Emily Ramirez in 1987, he continued. She was the first person who ever believed in me, not as an actor, but as a human being. We were young, we were in love. But life pulled us in different directions. When I left for California, I had no idea she was pregnant. I found out 4 nights ago, on a phone call I'll never forget. He looked up, steady. I didn't walk away from my daughter. I didn't abandon her. I didn't even know she existed. If I had, I would have been there. Every day, every year, for every scraped knee and birthday candle and heartbreak. He paused, emotion in his throat. To Sophia, he said, voice quieter now, I am so sorry I wasn't there. I can't give you the years we lost, but I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me. He looked out at the reporters, most of whom were now visibly moved. To my fans, he continued, you've supported me through decades of stories, roles, and journeys. But this one is real. It's not a character. It's not a script. It's my life. And right now, my life is in a hospital room, fighting for every breath. Another pause. He didn't blink when someone asked if he would be taking time away from his career. I've already stepped back, he answered. I'm not thinking about film sets or box office numbers. I'm thinking about my daughter, her health, and the little moments we're finally getting to share. One reporter asked about the backlash, rumors of a canceled film, investors pulling out, and pressure from studios to lay low. Keanu looked straight ahead. If there's fallout, so be it. I'm not interested in fixing a public image. I'm interested in fixing what matters." And with that, he stepped down from the podium and walked out, not waiting for another question. By the time Keanu left the press conference, the headlines had already begun to shift. Major outlets posted excerpts of his speech in real time. Clips went viral. Social media lit up with hashtags Keanu's Truth, Fathers Show Up, and Sophia Strong. But while the public buzzed, the fallout in Hollywood moved fast. That same afternoon, his agent called twice, once with concern, once with warning. A lead producer from an upcoming blockbuster franchise had sent word that they were reconsidering the optics of casting him. Another film, already in post-production, had quietly removed his name from the promotional calendar. Not canceled, not recast, just delayed. Keanu listened without interruption, sitting in the hospital cafeteria, untouched tea growing cold beside him. Then he said 5 words that ended the conversation. "I'm not chasing scripts right now." His agent paused. "You're serious?" "I'm in Chicago," Keanu said. "That's where I'll stay." The call ended. He didn't feel angry. He felt clear. Back in room 312, Emily scrolled through her own phone, lips pressed tight. "Some people think you're doing this for attention," she said quietly. "That you're using Sophia to clean up your image." Keanu glanced at her. "And do you believe that?" "No," she answered immediately. "But it still hurts to see." Sophia was sleeping again, a soft hum of monitors beside her. The treatment had been administered that morning. An injection so small and unremarkable, it felt impossible that it carried such weight. Now came the waiting and the risk. Keanu pulled his chair closer to the bed and sat down. "They can say whatever they want. I'm not here for them." Emily nodded slowly. "You meant what you said about staying." "I do," he replied. "I've spent years moving from one place to another. Film sets, locations, airports. I don't want to keep running. Not from this." A knock came at the door. It was Dr. Hernandez, holding a clipboard. Her expression was unreadable, the way professionals train themselves to be when emotions run too close to the surface. "Stable," the doctor said. "For now. But the next 48 hours will be critical. The gene therapy's effects should start to show up in her blood work by tomorrow night." Keanu nodded. "We'll be here." Dr. Hernandez looked between him and Emily. "And so will I." As the door closed, Keanu looked back at his daughter. Her cheeks were less sunken today. She seemed to be sleeping a little deeper, a little calmer. In the midst of chaos, it was the smallest signs that gave him hope. And if the world outside wanted to rage, they could. Inside this room, time was measured in heartbeats. That evening, as twilight swept across Chicago, Keanu stepped outside for the first time in hours. The protesters had mostly dispersed. The cameras were fewer now, and the questions shouted from across the sidewalk had softened into cautious curiosity rather than confrontation. But even with the noise thinning out, the questions lingered. Some still doubted his story. A popular gossip podcast released a speculative episode, questioning the timing of the revelation. A journalist posted a timeline that twisted events to paint him as conveniently repentant, accusing him of exploiting sympathy for damage control. Keanu read none of it. Instead, he sat on a bench just outside the hospital's side entrance, watching the lights in the upper floors flicker one by one. In his hand was a folded note, written by Sophia earlier that day. It was short, a few words in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for not leaving." He held that note like a fragile relic, as if its warmth could push back the chill of doubt cast by the outside world. Inside, Emily walked the hallway alone. Nurses smiled at her, more warmly now. One even whispered, "You raised an incredible girl." Emily didn't cry. Not yet. But her chest felt heavy with both pride and grief. She found Keanu on the bench, the note still in his hand. Some people are saying you'll never work in this town again, she said, sitting beside him. I've worked enough, he replied. What I haven't done enough of is this. She looked at him for a moment. You really mean that, don't you? He turned toward her. I've spent my life pretending to be fathers in movies, but this is the first time I've truly been one. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just full. Then Emily spoke, her voice softer. She's been through so much. I used to lie awake at night wondering what I'd tell her if I ever found you. What story would I give her to explain the silence? Keanu stared out into the darkening sky. And now? Emily smiled faintly. Now, I don't have to say anything. She sees it. She sees you. A car drove past slowly, its headlights briefly illuminating them before disappearing down the road. I'm not going back to LA anytime soon, Keanu said. Good, Emily replied. She'll need you. And maybe I will too. He looked over at her, and for a moment, the years between them fell away. This wasn't a press story. It wasn't a scandal. It was a family, wounded but rediscovering itself in the most unexpected way. And as the world spun on, Keanu remained still, firm, clear, and rooted, exactly where he needed to be. The days that followed were quiet, but never still. Each hour inside room 3012 carried the weight of everything Keanu had missed, and everything he now refused to lose. Sophia's treatment had taken hold. Her immune system was fragile, her strength unpredictable, but there were glimmers of change, a steadier heartbeat, a stronger voice, and once, during the early morning light, a genuine smile that caught him completely off guard. Keanu brought books, not ones about recovery or inspiration, just the kind of stories he used to love when he was her age. Vonnegut, Le Guin, a weathered copy of Watership Down. She devoured them slowly, asking quiet questions between pages. He also brought his old acoustic guitar, not to perform, just to fill the silence. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across her blanket, he played the opening chords of a song she didn't recognize. She listened for a while, then asked, "Is that yours?" He smiled. "Something I used to play when I didn't know what else to say." She nodded. "It's nice." They didn't talk much that day, and that was okay. He started calling her kiddo. It slipped out once when he handed her a juice box, and her eyebrows raised. "Did you just call me kiddo?" "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "I used to call my sister that when we were younger. Old habit." Sophia smirked. "You're way more awkward than I expected." Keanu laughed. "You're sharper than I expected. Guess we're even." Emily watched all of this unfold from the corner of the room. Her eyes followed the small gestures, the way Keanu gently adjusted Sophia's pillows, the careful patience with which he answered her questions, the soft notes he played just before she drifted off. It was beautiful, and it broke her heart. Late one evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Keanu stepped out into the hallway to stretch. He found Emily sitting in one of the padded chairs near the vending machine, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded too quickly, "Just tired." "You want to sit for a bit?" "I'm fine." But her voice cracked on the last word. Keanu didn't press. He sat beside her and waited. A few minutes passed. The hallway remained quiet. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't want to tell you this yet." He turned toward her, brows furrowed. "Tell me what?" She kept her eyes on the floor. "I'm sick too." The words landed like a punch. "I've been ignoring it for months, hoping it would go away. Shortness of breath, fatigue. Turns out it's early-stage heart failure." Keanu's mouth went dry. "Is it serious?" She nodded, her voice almost inaudible. "It's genetic. Runs on my dad's side. I've started meds, but they said if it progresses too fast." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Keanu just sat there, heart sinking, realizing he might not just be fighting for one life, He might be fighting for two. Keanu didn't speak right away. He let the silence do what it needed to. There was something sacred about not rushing past pain, not trying to fix it in the moment. Emily finally looked at him, her eyes wet but not fragile. She was still the same woman he remembered from Toronto. Quietly strong. Painfully honest. "I didn't want to burden you," she said. "You just found out about Sophia. I didn't want to pile on." "You're not piling on," he replied. "You're being real. And I'm here for that. For you." She exhaled, slow and tired. "There's no money for me to get specialized treatment. Everything I saved, everything I earned over the years, I put toward Sophia's medical bills. I never expected you to come back into the picture. I thought it would just be me until the end." Keanu leaned back in the chair. "Then it's a good thing I showed up late instead of never." She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "You're different, you know. Gentler than you used to be." "So are you," he said. "Still fierce, still beautiful. But there's something softer now, like you've been carrying the whole world and decided to stop apologizing for it." She looked away. "I never stopped carrying it. I just stopped telling anyone how heavy it was." They sat there in the hallway for a while longer. The vending machine buzzed. A nurse passed by, offered a quiet smile, and disappeared around the corner. When Keanu finally stood, he looked down at Emily and said, "You're not alone anymore. Not in any of this." The next morning, he began making calls, quietly, privately. No headlines, no cameras, just favors from people he trusted. A doctor in Boston who specialized in early-stage cardiomyopathy. A former film investor who had access to a private clinic in Montreal. A friend who owed him a kindness and knew someone on the board of a foundation that sponsored high-risk women's health cases. Emily didn't know what he was doing behind the scenes, and Keanu didn't tell her. Not yet. He just kept showing up. Every morning with fresh coffee, every afternoon with new books for Sophia, every evening with his guitar. Sophia began to recover more quickly than expected. Her blood counts improved, her appetite returned. One morning she asked if she could sit up on her own. By the end of the week, she asked Keanu if he'd help her walk around the floor. She clung to his arm as they shuffled down the hallway, slow but determined. Nurses smiled, patients watched in surprise, but no one interrupted. The world outside still swirled, but here, within these walls, a daughter was learning to trust her father. And Keanu, who had played so many heroes on screen, realized that this was the role he had waited his whole life to play. One evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Keanu stepped into the small family lounge near the end of the hallway. The room was dim, the only light coming from a lamp in the corner. Emily was sitting on the couch, legs curled beneath her, reading a folder of test results. He sat beside her without a word. She closed the folder. "Boston called today," she said. "Your doctor friend. They want to run some imaging, get a clearer look at the scarring." Keanu nodded. "You going to go?" "I think so," she whispered. "I'm scared, but if Sophia's getting a second chance, I should at least try." He smiled gently. "That's all I ask." Emily leaned her head back against the cushion. "You know what the hardest part is?" He turned to her. "Learning to let someone take care of me. I've spent 17 years building a life around being the strong one. Now you show up with calm eyes and deep pockets, and suddenly, I'm the one leaning." Keanu let the silence settle before answering. "Maybe leaning isn't weakness. Maybe it's finally being able to breathe." She looked at him for a long moment. "Did you practice that line?" He chuckled. "No, but, I've lived it." They both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that comes after tears, when the heart has no more room for fear. In the following days, Sophia's progress surprised even Dr. Hernandez. Her blood markers improved steadily. Her strength returned. The therapy, once considered a long shot, was working. The hospital team called it a quiet miracle. Keanu called it grace. He and Sophia developed a rhythm. He helped brush her hair when she was too tired. They played simple card games and argued about music. She confessed her favorite band was one he had never heard of, and he promised to give it a chance. One afternoon, she asked, "Are you going to stay, after this?" Keanu looked at her and said, "As long as you'll have me." She smiled. "Forever sounds good." Emily watched all of it unfold, her heart swelling and aching at once. Her daughter was healing. Her old love had returned, and though her own health was uncertain, she no longer felt like she was drowning alone. One night, Keanu stood in the doorway, looking at both of them. Emily asleep in a chair, Sophia asleep in her bed. He whispered to himself, "This is what matters." It wasn't the noise outside, not the gossip, the backlash, or the career changes. It was the soft inhale of a daughter resting peacefully, the steady beat of hope in a mother's chest, and the quiet vow of a father who had finally found home. The call came just before dawn. Keanu was half asleep in the recliner beside Sophia's hospital bed, his hand still resting on hers. Emily stood by the window, watching the pink haze of morning stretch across the Chicago skyline. Dr. Hernandez stepped into the room, clipboard in hand, her face grave but purposeful. "It's approved," she said softly. "The therapy has cleared customs. It's being flown in now from Berlin. We'll begin prep in 2 hours." Keanu stood, instantly awake. "What do we need to do?" Dr. Hernandez explained the process. This wasn't just another infusion. It was a gene-edited immunotherapy developed overseas, a highly customized treatment designed to recognize and eliminate the specific mutation Sophia's leukemia had built its fortress behind. Only 5 patients had ever received it. 2 had gone into full remission, 2 showed partial success. 1 had died within hours. The odds were sobering, but time was a thief they could no longer outrun. Emily listened without blinking. "And the risks?" Dr. Hernandez nodded. "Organ rejection, neurological side effects, severe cytokine storms. It's high risk, but it's our best shot at a cure." Sophia stirred then, her eyes fluttering open as if she already knew something had changed. "Hey, kiddo," Keanu said, kneeling beside her. She looked at him, then at Emily. "It's happening, isn't it?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, baby. Today's the day." Sophia didn't cry. She just nodded, her face pale but composed. "Let's do it." The room was prepped in less than an hour. Nurses moved swiftly, double-checking machines, lines, and emergency backup systems. Sophia was wheeled away around 9:30, IEMing, her hand gripping Keanu's until the last possible second. He kissed her forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up." Emily followed the gurney to the edge of the surgical ward, then stopped, her knees almost buckling as the doors swung shut behind her daughter. Keanu caught her. "I've got you," he whispered. The waiting began. 16 hours stretched ahead like a mountain they weren't sure they could climb. The hospital gave them a private room near the operating wing, furnished with 2 chairs, a table, and a view of nothing. Keanu paced for the first 2 hours, then sat down and opened his leather-bound journal. He didn't plan to write anything, but the words came anyway. He stirred a letter. "To my daughter, Sophia." Across from him, Emily sat with a pen and a yellow legal pad. She wasn't journaling, she was drafting a will. Slowly, carefully, the way someone writes who has made peace with both life and death. They said little to each other, just glances, just presence. The hours passed, one drip of silence after another. Outside, the world spun on, but inside that quiet room, 2 people waited on the edge of hope, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to believe too soon. By the 8th hour, the waiting room felt like a world of its own. Keanu had filled 5 pages of the letter, writing, pausing, tearing out lines that felt wrong, then writing again. "To my daughter, Sophia," he wrote, "I wish I had known you sooner. I wish I had been there for your first words, your first heartbreak, your first time realizing the world isn't always kind. But I promise you, if you wake up, I'll be there for everything else. Every single thing." He folded the pages carefully and placed them into an envelope. It wasn't labeled. He didn't want to think of a scenario where anyone else would read it first. Emily hadn't moved much. The legal pad rested on her lap, mostly filled now. She had listed her few assets, named Sophia as her sole heir, and left instructions for a simple funeral. But what she focused on most was a letter of her own. This one addressed to both Keanu and Sophia. "I was never sure if I did the right thing keeping her from you," she had written. "But I raised her on stories about courage and kindness, and I see both of those in her now, and in you." Sometime after midnight, a nurse entered with water, soft blankets, and word that the procedure had entered the final phase. Sophia was stable, no major immune response yet. But the next 2 hours were the most critical. Emily stood and stretched, her muscles stiff from the hours of stillness. Keanu joined her near the window. The city lights blurred through the glass, a wash of yellow and red. Below, taxis crawled along quiet streets. Inside the hospital, everything was still. "Do you believe in miracles?" Emily asked quietly. Keanu thought for a long moment. "I think I believe in people who fight for them." She nodded. "That's close enough." Then, as if summoned by the weight of their waiting, the door creaked open. Dr. Hernandez stepped in. Her face was unreadable, as if she'd practiced it in the mirror to protect families from hope too soon or heartbreak too suddenly. Emily gripped the back of the chair. Keanu stood still. The doctor removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "He made it through the full cycle," she said at last. "There were complications, but she's alive. She's breathing on her own." Emily gasped and clutched her chest, the relief making her knees buckle. Keanu moved quickly, catching her arm, holding her upright. "There's more testing to do," the doctor continued, "but the first indicators are promising. We'll keep her sedated until morning, but she's still fighting." Keanu felt his breath return to his lungs like a gift he'd forgotten how to receive. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not his career, not the headlines, not the years lost. His daughter was still here, and that was everything. Keanu stayed by Sophia's bedside long after the others had left the recovery wing. The room was dim, lit only by a soft light over her monitor. Machines hummed gently beside her, their rhythms steady, their presence no longer frightening, but reassuring. Her face was pale, her body still, but her chest rose and fell, each breath a quiet testimony that she was still fighting. He pulled up a chair and opened his journal again, not to write, but to read the letter he'd written her. He held it in both hands, silently mouthing the words, imagining a moment when he could read it aloud. "I miss the start of your story," he whispered, "but I'll be here for every chapter forward." A nurse peeked in and nodded gently, then backed out without a word. In the hallway, Emily leaned against the wall, her hands trembling. The fear she had carried for 17 years hadn't left. It had only changed shape. Keanu joined her not long after. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," she replied. He took her hand without hesitation. "Then we'll rest here." She didn't let go. They sat together in silence, two exhausted parents holding the weight of the moment between them. Neither wanted to move, afraid that the fragile peace might break. Hours passed. Just before dawn, a nurse walked briskly into the waiting area. "She's waking up," she said. Keanu and Emily moved together, stepping into Sophia's room just as her eyes fluttered open. He blinked against the light, then squinted at the silhouettes hovering near. Keanu stepped forward. "Hey, kiddo." Her voice was a whisper. "That song you played, was it yours?" He laughed softly, his chest tightening with joy. "Yeah, I wrote it for someone brave." She managed a weak smile. "You're such a dork." He nodded. "And proud of it." Emily leaned in, brushing Sophia's hair back from her forehead. "You scared us," she said gently. "I'm still here," Sophia whispered. And she was. The therapy had worked. For now. The real battle was far from over. But in that small hospital room, with the first light of morning breaking across the windows, a family found themselves beginning again. It wasn't a happy ending, not yet, but it was a chance. And sometimes, a chance is the most miraculous thing of all. The first 24 hours were the longest of Keanu's life. Every beep of the monitor, every flicker of Sophia's pulse on the screen felt like holding his breath. The doctors had explained that these were the most critical hours. If her body accepted the therapy without major complications, the odds would start tilting in her favor. But if not, Keanu didn't finish the thought. He couldn't. Sophia lay still, the lines from the IV glinting softly under the overhead lights. Her face was pale, her eyelids swollen from the medication, but she was there. He could feel it. He pulled his chair closer and opened a slim poetry book he'd brought with him, a collection Emily had given him back in college. He'd kept it all these years, somehow. The pages were yellowed, the spine cracked. He read aloud in a whisper, not knowing if Sophia could hear, but needing to speak anyway. He read Pablo Neruda, then Mary Oliver, then a few verses from Wendell Berry. "Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts," he whispered. "Walk on. Walk on through the dark." Hours passed. Emily came and went, checking in with nurses, updating distant relatives by phone, pacing the hallway with her hands clenched behind her back. Keanu didn't leave Sophia's side. Not once. When he wasn't reading, he hummed softly, lullabies from childhood, a few Beatles tunes, that unfinished melody he'd been playing on his guitar days earlier. A nurse brought him soup and gently encouraged him to eat. He nodded, thanked her, but didn't move. At one point, he leaned close and whispered, "You're the strongest person I know, kiddo. You don't have to be perfect. Just stay. That's enough." The second day arrived quietly. A gray morning settled over the hospital. The doctors checked her vitals, updated her charts, and nodded without saying too much. That was good. No emergencies, no signs of rejection. Keanu rested his head on the bed, his fingers gently wrapped around Sophia's hand. His eyes closed for just a moment. Then, he felt a twitch. He looked up. Her fingers moved. He stood, quickly, heart pounding, just as Sophia's eyes began to open. Slowly, weakly, she blinked. "Hey," he said, his voice cracking. Sophia's lips moved, barely a whisper. "Hey, Dad." His knees almost gave out. He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers as she took a shallow breath. "Did we win?" He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and nodded. "We did today, and we're gonna win again tomorrow." She gave the faintest smile before her eyes closed again, this time just for rest, not retreat. Emily stood in the doorway, tears falling silently down her cheeks. She stepped inside, reached for Keanu's hand, and held it tight. They stood there, side by side, watching Sophia sleep. And for the first time, it felt like they weren't just fighting for survival. It felt like they were a family. Emily didn't speak for a long time. She just stood next to Keanu, watching the slow rise and fall of Sophia's chest. The soft click of the monitors and the rhythmic pulse of the oxygen machine filled the silence. But nothing about the moment felt empty. "I never thought I'd see this," she whispered eventually. Not her making it through, not this. Keanu looked at her, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I didn't think I deserved this." Emily gave him a tired smile. "Maybe none of us do. Maybe grace isn't something we earn." She walked over and brushed Sophia's hair from her forehead. Her daughter stirred, just slightly, and let out a soft sigh. Keanu sat down again and reached for the poetry book, flipping it open to a dog-eared page. "Can I?" he asked. Emily nodded, sitting beside him. He began to read. "This is what was bequeathed us. This earth the beloved left. Then leaving, left to us." The words floated in the air like balm. They weren't just reading to Sophia anymore. They were reading to themselves, to the bruised hearts still learning how to mend. As the day wore on, Sophia woke more often. She was still weak, barely able to hold a sip of water, but she was awake, and every time her eyes fluttered open, she looked for them. Always both of them. Emily brought in photos from home, baby pictures of Sophia with crooked ponytails and cake-covered cheeks. Keanu taped one near the monitor, right where Sophia could see it. "That one was her 3rd birthday," Emily said. "She insisted on having a dinosaur cake, but cried when we cut into it." Keanu laughed. "I would have cried too." Sophia stirred, half awake, and whispered, "It had pink frosting." They both leaned in, smiling wide. "Do you remember?" Keanu asked. Sophia nodded faintly. "I remember everything." By evening, the medical team confirmed what they'd been hoping for. The treatment was working, no signs of immune rejection, no new complications. "He's not out of the woods," Dr. Hernandez cautioned, "but she's walking the path." Keanu stepped into the hallway and let out a long breath. His body sagged with the weight of so many sleepless nights, of holding fear in his lungs too long. Emily joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think we can sleep tonight." "Together?" he asked gently. She smiled. "At least in the same hospital." That night they sat in the small family room with warm tea and thick blankets. Sophia slept peacefully in the next room, a nurse monitoring her vitals. Keanu opened his journal one last time that day and added a single line. "Today, we got one more day. Sometimes that's all life offers. And sometimes it's more than enough." The morning Sophia took her first few steps without assistance, Keanu's phone buzzed with a string of missed calls and unread texts. At first, he ignored it. The only thing he cared about was the way she gripped the IV pole and lifted one trembling foot in front of the other, whispering, "Don't let go," while Emily stood behind with tears in her eyes. But the phone kept buzzing. Later, while Sophia napped and Emily stepped out for lunch, Keanu opened his messages. He should have expected it. Headlines, screenshots. A photo of a crumpled handwritten letter, yellowed with time, splashed across a gossip site's homepage. The headline read, "Reeves's past revealed. Leaked letter shows actor broke her heart before vanishing." It was a letter he had written to Emily when he first moved to California. A painful, honest attempt to express how overwhelmed he felt, how unsure he was about long-distance love and the chaotic road ahead. He never meant to hurt her, but now the world was reading it like it was some kind of confession. The media storm reignited. Talk shows speculated, fans on social media divided. Some rushed to defend him, calling the leaked letter private, irrelevant. Others painted him as a heartbreaker who had abandoned a child. Then came the message from his agent. "Studio's getting cold feet, the sequel is postponed indefinitely." And from his manager, "They want you to make a statement, something controlled. Get ahead of this." Keanu tossed the phone onto the hospital room couch. His personal life unraveled, just as Sophia began to stitch hers back together. That night, while Sophia slept peacefully, Keanu received one more call. It was short, clipped, and final. His girlfriend of the past 3 years, someone he had quietly dated, kept away from the public eye, ended things over the phone. I didn't know this whole other part of you existed," she said. "You should have told me." He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply said, "I didn't know either." After the call ended, he sat by Sophia's bed and listened to the soft hum of her breathing. When Emily came in, she noticed his shoulders hunched, eyes distant. "More news?" she asked gently. He nodded. "They found the old letter. The one I sent you when I left." Emily froze. "I never showed anyone that." "You didn't have to. Someone else did." He told her about the headlines, the lost role, the phone call from his girlfriend. Emily sat across from him, quiet for a long time. "You can walk away," she said finally. "I wouldn't blame you. This isn't what you signed up for." Keanu looked at her, tired but resolute. "I'm not leaving again," he said. "Never." She held his gaze, her eyes filling with something more than tears, something closer to belief. She didn't speak, she just nodded. In the silence that followed, Sophia stirred. Keanu leaned over and tucked the blanket around her shoulders. The world outside could twist the narrative however it wanted. They could write their articles and spin their stories. But in that small room, all that mattered was a daughter healing, a mother surviving, and a man who had finally come home. Emily didn't bring it up again. Neither did Keanu. But the weight of what was happening outside the hospital followed them everywhere. The nurses began to recognize the tension too. Reporters had returned, this time with new headlines, new speculation. A viral tweet accused Keanu of using Sophia's illness for sympathy. A podcast host mocked his press conference. A late-night comedian joked, "Turns out even Keanu Reeves has a secret past." And apparently, a secret kid too. Inside the hospital, the staff shielded Sophia from most of it. Her social media was deactivated, no phones, no TV, no access to the chaos unfolding beyond her room. But Keanu could feel it. Producers called again. One wanted to know if Keanu would reconsider a pre-recorded interview. "Just 10 minutes, they said. "Frame the story your way." Another suggested he issue a formal apology for not disclosing his past sooner. It would, they said, help the brand. He deleted the voicemails without responding. The next time he and Emily stepped outside for fresh air, they passed two strangers whispering near the parking lot. One pointed. The other looked away quickly. Emily shook her head. "This is getting out of hand." Keanu stayed silent. Back inside, Sophia was sitting up in bed, coloring. Her cheeks had more color, her eyes more light. She looked up as they entered. "Did someone take a picture of you guys?" she asked. Keanu blinked. "Why do you ask?" She held up her sketch pad. On it, she had drawn a cartoon version of him and Emily holding hands, with a tiny version of herself between them. "Because when the nurse took me to the courtyard this morning, I saw a guy with a camera ducked behind a car." Keanu exhaled through his nose, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, kiddo. They're not that scary." Sophia looked at him. "They're not scary. They're annoying." Emily snorted, covering her mouth. Sophia went back to coloring, unfazed. Later that night, Keanu sat by the window with his journal again. He didn't write much, just one line. "Tame, don't get to tell me who I am." He closed the book and looked back at Emily, who was resting in the chair, arms crossed gently over her chest. Despite everything, the headlines, the betrayals, the career fallout, he felt something solid under his feet. He had missed birthdays, milestones, growing pains, but he wasn't missing this. He wasn't missing now. He wasn't missing tomorrow. When the nurse peeked in around midnight to check Sophia's vitals, Keanu asked her quietly if she could dim the lights. "I just want her to sleep well," he said. As the room darkened, he took Sophia's small hand in his and whispered, "I'll be right here." And despite the voices shouting outside the hospital walls, despite the judgment and the noise, there was still peace in that room. Because he meant it. He wasn't going anywhere. Sophia's release day came on a breezy afternoon in early spring. The cherry blossoms outside the hospital had begun to open. Pink petals floated on the wind like fragile confetti, and for the first time in weeks, Sophia felt the warmth of the sun on her face without glass between her and the sky. Keanu wheeled her out of the hospital doors while Emily walked beside them, holding the discharge papers and a folded blanket. Nurses lined the hallway inside as they left, waving softly, some with tears in their eyes. Dr. Hernandez stood near the exit and gave Sophia a proud nod. "You're a miracle, young lady," she said. Sophia smiled weakly. I had help. Keanu had rented a small house 30 minutes outside Chicago. It sat on a quiet street with old oak trees and a deep porch swing. It wasn't grand or glamorous. It wasn't Los Angeles. It was just enough. There was a garden in the backyard, a piano in the corner of the living room, a cozy bedroom with yellow curtains for Sophia, already filled with books, sketch pads, and a fuzzy blanket she once mentioned liking in the hospital. He didn't say much when they arrived. He simply carried her inside, settled her onto the couch, and made her favorite soup, chicken and stars from a can, because she hated anything fancy. Emily moved into the guest room, though Keanu had made it feel like home for her, too. There were framed photographs from her college days, a shelf with her favorite poetry books, and a small jar of sea glass she used to collect during vacations with Sophia. That first night, everything felt strangely normal. Sophia curled up under a blanket and watched an old cartoon. Emily folded laundry quietly, humming a song under her breath. Keanu sat by the fire, tuning a guitar. The rhythm of ordinary life, so long absent, began to take shape. The next morning, Sophia sat at the kitchen table, slowly eating toast. She looked between the two of them and asked without warning, "Are we a family now?" The question settled like dust in sunlight. Quiet, still, too heavy and too light at the same time. Keanu opened his mouth, but no words came. Emily looked at Sophia and smiled softly. "We're trying." Sophia nodded, like that answer made sense. Later that afternoon, Emily found Keanu in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt. He was planting a row of flowers, lilies and marigolds, she noticed. His hands were covered in soil, sweat on his brow, but he looked peaceful. "You're not very good at this," she teased gently. He chuckled, "Nope, but I figured it's about time I learned how to make something grow." She knelt beside him, brushing soil from her palms. "You already have." They stayed there a while, not talking, just feeling the sunlight between them. That night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Emily stood in the kitchen rinsing glasses. Keanu came up behind her, slowly, cautiously, and reached for a towel to help dry. Their hands touched. She turned, and for the first time in 25 years, they kissed. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was slow, sad, and full of hope. The kiss didn't solve everything, but it opened a door they had both been standing in front of for too long. When they pulled apart, neither said a word. They didn't need to. Keanu stepped back slightly and looked into Emily's eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Instead, she whispered, "It's been a long road." He nodded, "And we're still on it." She smiled faintly. "But this time, maybe we're walking together." The next morning, they woke up to sunlight pouring through the kitchen window. Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor, building a puzzle, the kind with too many pieces and no clear strategy. But she was humming. That was new. Keanu poured coffee and passed a mug to Emily. Their hands brushed again. This time, they didn't flinch. They just smiled. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. Sophia grew stronger. Her appetite returned. Her laughter became more frequent. Keanu and Emily found themselves building something unspoken between them. Not a romance, not yet, but a deeper understanding. A shared breath after too many years of silence. One evening, they took Sophia to the lake. She sat on a blanket while Keanu played guitar and Emily snapped pictures with her old camera. The wind blew gently across the water. Ducks floated by in the distance. For the first time in her 17 years, Sophia didn't feel like something was missing. She looked up from her sketchbook and asked, "Can I ask something kind of weird?" Keanu looked at her. "Of course. If you had known about me earlier, would you have stayed?" The question hung in the air. Keanu put down the guitar. His voice was steady, but his eyes were full. "If I'd known, nothing would have kept me away." Sophia nodded slowly, accepting it. "Then I'm glad you know now." That night, back at the house, Keanu walked into the living room and found Emily staring at an old photo. It was one she had taken in college. He recognized it immediately. It was him, sitting under a tree, reading a script. Unaware the camera was even on him. "You kept it?" he asked. She looked over her shoulder. "It reminded me of who you were, before everything got complicated." He sat beside her. "Do you think I'm still that person?" Emily studied his face for a long time before answering. "No, but I think you're someone better." Keanu felt something shift in his chest. "I'm scared," he admitted, "of messing this up, of hurting you again, of not being enough for her." "You don't have to be perfect," Emily said gently. "You just have to stay." He nodded. "Then I will." They didn't kiss again that night. They didn't need to. Instead, they sat together until the fire in the living room burned low. Outside, the world moved on. No cameras, no noise, no judgment. Inside that house, there was only healing. A father who had come too late but stayed anyway. A mother who had carried the weight of two. And a daughter who was slowly learning what second chances really looked like. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning. Keanu was in the kitchen making French toast. Sophia's request. Emily had just stepped out to the porch with her tea, wrapped in her favorite cardigan. The air was cool but sweet, and the birds were loud in that way they only are in early spring. He heard the mug shatter first, then the thud. Keanu dropped the spatula and ran. Emily was crumpled on the porch, eyes fluttering, hand trembling against the wood. Her tea pooled near her fingers, soaking into the hem of her cardigan. Sophia screamed from the hallway. Keanu knelt, checking her pulse, calling her name. She was conscious, but barely. An ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. At the hospital, the diagnosis was swift. Her heart was weakening faster than expected. The medication she'd been on was no longer effective. She needed more advanced care, possibly surgical intervention. Keanu? He made the call to transfer her to a specialist clinic in the city known for its pioneering cardiac team. They had treated high-risk cases like Emily's before. Time was everything. Sophia rode with him in the back of the ambulance. Her hand never left her mother's. After they got Emily settled in, the reality of it all began to settle on them. The roles had shifted. Sophia, still recovering herself, insisted on helping. She brought Emily her water, adjusted her blankets, made jokes about the hospital food. Sometimes she just sat next to her bed and played soft music from her phone. When the nurses came in, Sophia took notes, asked questions, made sure everything was written down. One night, as they walked to the parking lot after visiting hours, Keanu looked at her and said, "You're stronger than me." Sophia blinked at him in the soft amber light. "No," she said quietly. "I'm strong because of you." He didn't respond. He just opened the passenger door for her and rested his hand briefly on her shoulder before she stepped inside. That night, after Sophia went to bed, Keanu returned to the hospital alone. Emily was awake, her eyes heavy but focused. "I know what's happening," she said. Keanu sat beside her. "You're going to fight this?" She smiled. "You don't have to say that." "I mean it." She took his hand. "I've written something. For you, just in case." He shook his head. "Please." He didn't argue. She handed him a sealed envelope. No name on it, just a pale blue sticker holding it closed. Keanu stared at it for a long time before slipping it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Emily's hand found his again. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "But if I don't make it, just remember this has all been worth it." He nodded, unable to speak. The machines around her beeped in steady rhythm, reminding them both that the clock was still ticking. Outside the window, the city lights pulsed like stars. In that moment, love didn't feel like a soft promise. It felt like armor. The next week became a blur of hospital corridors, waiting rooms, and whispered updates from nurses who never smiled quite wide enough. Emily's condition fluctuated. Some days her energy returned in brief, radiant moments. Other days, she barely opened her eyes. Sophia refused to miss a single visit. No matter how tired she was, she showed up every morning with a sketch pad and a new story to tell. One afternoon, while Keanu sat beside Emily watching her sleep, Sophia returned from the cafeteria with 2 cups of tea and a small chocolate bar she'd bartered from a vending machine. She handed one to Keanu and sat in the chair opposite. "Did she ever tell you about the turtle?" she asked suddenly. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "The turtle?" Sophia grinned. "When I was 6, I found a turtle near the school playground. I wanted to keep it. She said no, that it needed freedom. So I tried hiding it under my bed. Didn't work. The next morning it had escaped and was crawling across her pillow." Keanu laughed, surprised by how vivid the image was. He screamed so loud, I swear the neighbors heard. "I would have screamed too," he said, still smiling. But then she said something I never forgot. She said, "If you really love something, you'll let it go where it can grow, even if you miss it." Keanu looked down at the tea in his hands. The steam was rising in lazy curls. "That sounds like her." Sophia leaned forward. "I know she gave you a letter." Keanu met her eyes. "She introed me." He nodded slowly. "I haven't opened it." "Don't wait too long," Sophia said gently. "She doesn't want you to have regrets." That night, after Sophia had fallen asleep at the house and Keanu returned alone again, he found Emily staring out the window at the skyline. Her skin looked pale beneath the hospital lights, but her voice still carried the same softness he remembered from their youth. "I saw the news," she murmured. "They're still talking about you." Keanu scoffed. "Let them." I read a headline. "Keanu Reeves sacrifices Hollywood for a woman he left behind." He rolled his eyes, dramatic. She turned toward him. "Is that what this is? A sacrifice?" He walked to her bedside and shook his head. "No," he said. "It's the best thing I've ever done." Her eyes welled with tears. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it because it's true." She reached for his hand. "You didn't owe us anything. Not after all these years." "I don't owe you," Keanu whispered. "I love you." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of it. After everything? Because of everything. The machines beside her kept beeping, steady and measured. The silence in the room felt sacred. Emily closed her eyes, her grip tightening slightly. "I'm scared," she said softly. Keanu leaned closer. "Then I'll be brave enough for both of us." Outside, the wind howled against the hospital walls. Inside, they held on to each other, not out of fear, but out of love born from scars. And as the night stretched on, Keanu thought of the unopened letter in his jacket pocket, still unread, still sealed, and waited for the right moment. He knew now the cost of love wasn't fame or reputation. It was staying. It was witnessing. It was being there when it mattered most. It had been nearly a month since Emily's collapse. The specialists had stabilized her heart enough to give her a few more good days, and those days felt like stolen treasure. Keanu clung to them like a man starved for time, filling every hour with memories he prayed would last a lifetime. He had made a decision. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sudden, it was quiet and sure, like the sound of his heartbeat when Emily fell asleep beside him in the hospital chair. One morning, he looked at her and knew he didn't want to lose her without trying to make her his wife. So he told Sophia. They were at a jewelry shop in downtown Chicago, tucked away in a side street where no one recognized him. The clerk greeted them with a polite smile, completely unaware of who was browsing the velvet-lined cases. Sophia leaned over the glass, pointing. "That one. The band is simple, but it has this little twist on the edge. Like her." Keanu looked at the ring. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream wealth or fame, but it was honest, beautiful, uncomplicated. Just like Emily. He nodded. "That's the one." Sophia smiled, proud. "She's going to say yes, you know." Keanu looked at her. "I hope so." They kept it a secret for 3 days. During that time, Keanu rehearsed what he would say, not as an actor memorizing lines, but as a man who knew the weight behind every word. He thought about where he'd kneel, maybe the hospital garden, maybe her room, during one of the quiet afternoons when she was strong enough to smile. But on the 4th morning, everything changed. Emily didn't wake up. The nurses tried everything. They stabilized her vitals, moved her to the ICU, and ran tests. But the signs were clear. Her heart had weakened beyond repair. Her organs were beginning to shut down. Her body, so strong for so long, was finally giving out. Keanu sat beside her, the ring box in his pocket, unopened. Sophia arrived minutes later, her face pale and scared. She didn't speak. She just walked to the opposite side of the bed and took her mother's hand. Emily stirred. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, the weight of her lids visible. Keanu leaned in. "Hey!" She smiled faintly. "You look tired." He laughed through tears. "You should see yourself." Her fingers brushed his. "I heard. You went shopping." Keanu blinked. "How did you?" She whispered. "I'm not blind." He took the box out and placed it in her hand. "I was going to ask you if you wanted forever with me." She didn't open it. She just held it tightly, like it was something sacred. "You already gave me forever," she said, her voice thin. "In these months." He bent closer. "It wasn't enough." Her lips trembled. "It was everything." She turned her head slightly toward Sophia, who was crying quietly now. "Take care of her," Emily said. "Both of you." Then she closed her eyes. Her hand relaxed, and with a breath so soft it barely moved the air, Emily was gone. The room fell into silence. Keanu didn't move, neither did Sophia. Time felt like it had splintered into stillness, like every second wanted to hold Emily just a little longer. The monitors, once full of rhythmic beeping, had slowed, then stopped. A nurse quietly stepped in, checked vitals, and gently covered Emily's body with a white sheet, pausing only to rest a hand over her shoulder for a brief moment of respect. But Keanu remained seated, his hand still holding hers beneath the blanket. Sophia was the one who finally stood. She walked to the window, pressed her forehead to the glass, and whispered something no one could hear. When she turned around, her face was streaked with tears, but her voice was clear. "We should take her home." Keanu looked at her. "I mean, when it's time," she added. "She should be somewhere with light, not in here." He nodded slowly. "She always liked the lake." "Yeah," Sophia said softly. "She used to say it was her forever place." 2 days later, they held a private service. No cameras, no press, no strangers. Just a few close friends, some old neighbors, a handful of former students from the high school where Emily had taught. It was quiet and beautiful, just the way she would have wanted. Keanu stood beside the small urn that held her ashes, the ring box resting in his pocket, still unopened. He hadn't had the heart to bury it with her. Instead, he left something else. The first photo Emily ever took of him, back in Toronto. He folded it gently and slid it between the flowers beside her urn. "You always saw something in me," he whispered, "even when I didn't." Sophia came up beside him and held his hand. "She knew you'd come back," she said. "She just didn't know how long it would take." They drove back to the house that night in silence. Keanu kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting gently over Sophia's. When they got home, she went straight to her mother's bedroom and pulled the blankets tight over the empty bed. Then she walked into the living room and sat beside Keanu on the couch, curling into his side. "He didn't just give me life," Sophia said, after a long pause. "She gave me you." Keanu closed his eyes. He felt the grief rising again, raw and full of ache. But beneath it was something else. Not relief, exactly, not peace, but clarity. "She made me better," he whispered, "all over again." Sophia reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out something folded. A note. "She wrote you this too." Keanu looked at the paper in his hand. It was different from the sealed envelope in his jacket. This one was handwritten, smudged in places, like it had been read over and over. He opened it. It said simply, "Forever isn't measured in years, it's measured in how deeply we love." And under it, in fading ink, "You were my forever, you still are." He sat back, the paper trembling slightly in his fingers. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling through the branches. Inside, a father and daughter sat shoulder to shoulder, holding onto something fragile and fierce. Los interrupted, but never undone. The letter sat unopened on Keanu's nightstand for 3 weeks. It was still sealed with the pale blue sticker. The envelope had softened slightly at the corners from being handled so many times, but he hadn't yet found the strength to read it. Every night, he looked at it. Every morning, he told himself, maybe tonight. But it was Sophia who finally changed that. They were in the backyard, lying on a picnic blanket under the night sky. The house was quiet, the breeze gentle. Sophia had brought out 2 mugs of hot cocoa, just like her mom used to make, with a dash of cinnamon on top. She looked at Keanu and said, "I think she'd want you to read it." He didn't ask which letter she meant. He already knew. "She wrote it for you," Sophia continued. "She wrote it so you'd know exactly how she felt, and because she knew. Sometimes you need words more than anyone else." Keanu stared at the sky. The stars were faint behind the city glow, but they were there. Constant, unblinking. He stood up, went inside, and came back out with the envelope. Sophia stayed beside him in silence as he opened it. The letter was written in Emily's soft, looping handwriting. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. He read it once, then again. And somewhere in the middle of the 3rd time, the tears came. Not the quiet ones he'd shed at the funeral. These were deep, shaking sobs. The kind that come from a place far below memory, from a wound buried so deep you forget it's there until it breaks open. Sophia moved closer and held onto him without saying a word. When he finally looked up, the letter was still open in his lap. He read part of it aloud. "You were always my impossible dream, Keanu." But Sophia was the reality that made life beautiful. His voice broke on the last word. Later that night, he placed the letter in a frame, not to display, but to protect it. He tucked it away with her photos, journals, and the film camera she used to carry on their walks. The next day, he made the call. A month later, the Emily Foundation for Rare Cancers was born. It wasn't about publicity. There was no press release, no red carpet gala. Just a mission, a modest office in Chicago, and a small but passionate team. Keanu quietly donated the initial funds, enough to sponsor 15 full treatments for children with aggressive rare cancer types. The foundation's logo was simple, a cluster of stars over a dark blue sky. It was from a photo Emily had taken in 1987 during one of their walks by Lake Ontario. Sophia found the photo buried in an old contact sheet inside her mom's photography drawer. She'd scanned it, cleaned it up, and presented it to Keanu on the day they finalized the foundation paperwork. "She always loved the stars," Sophia said. She said they made her feel like time was just a suggestion. Keanu smiled. They still do. In the weeks that followed, Sophia slowly regained her strength. Her lab results stabilized. Her doctors smiled more. There were fewer machines, fewer alarms, more windows, more laughter. But then came the letter from UCLA. She read it alone in her room, then burst out the door and into the living room, waving it over her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I got in." Keanu stood and pulled her into a hug that lasted a long time. When they finally stepped back, he said, "Your mom would be so proud." Sophia whispered, "I hope so." The acceptance letter sat on the mantel for days, right next to the photo of Emily holding Sophia as a baby. Every time Keanu passed it, he smiled, then paused. Pride and sorrow shared space in his chest now, but they didn't battle. They simply coexisted, like the stars in the night sky. One evening, just before Sophia's big move, Keanu walked into her room with a small black box in his hand. She was sitting on the floor among her half-packed suitcases, sorting through old sketchbooks and loose photographs. He sat down beside her and placed the box gently in her palm. She opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny charm, an old-fashioned rocket ship, barely an inch long. Sophia's brow furrowed. "It's beautiful, but why a rocket?" Keanu looked at her. His voice was quiet. "Because you were always my biggest journey." She didn't speak right away. Her fingers traced the outline of the charm, as if memorizing it. Then she reached over and hugged him. Tight. "I'm scared," she whispered. "To go. To leave this house. To leave you." Keanu's arms stayed around her. "That's how you know it's real. The best journeys always feel a little scary at the start." She nodded against his chest. The next morning, they loaded up her bags into the back of a rental SUV. The foundation had offered to fly her out, but Sophia wanted the drive. Wanted to see the country with her father before everything changed again. They made it a road trip. They stopped at small diners, bought postcards, told stories. In one quiet town in Nebraska, they sat under the stars, pointing out constellations. Sophia wore the necklace every day, never taking it off. She'd hold it when the road got long or when the silence between songs felt a little too heavy. On their last night before arriving in Los Angeles, they stayed in a small coastal motel overlooking the ocean. Keanu sat on the balcony while Sophia napped inside, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace. The grief hadn't left. It never would. But now, it lived beside something else. When they pulled into UCLA's campus, the nerves returned for both of them. Students buzzed past in every direction. Parents hugged and cried and unloaded dorm supplies. Keanu parked the car and turned to Sophia. "You don't have to rush into anything," he said. "Classes, friendships. You take your time." Sophia smiled. "I've got a rocket ship, remember? I'll figure it out." They laughed. He carried her last bag up to her dorm room, hugged her one more time, and stood in the hallway until she waved him off with a grin and a teary wink. That night, back at the motel, he opened her contact on his phone. The profile picture was of her holding the necklace in the palm of her hand, sun shining across her face. He stared at it for a moment, then typed, "Let me know when you land in your new galaxy." She replied within seconds, "Already orbiting." Keanu chuckled and put the phone down. Somewhere outside, the stars blinked again. This time, one of them had a name, and he would carry it, and the woman who gave it life, with him, always. The wind was calm along the lake. Seagulls drifted quietly above the shoreline, and the ripples on the water shimmered like silver threads stretched toward the horizon. Keanu sat alone on a wooden bench near the edge of Lake Michigan, his coat collar turned up against the breeze. He stared out at the water for a long time. The city moved behind him, traffic hummed, laughter echoed faintly from a family walking by. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But Keanu's focus was fixed on the surface of the lake, on the way it mirrored the clouds, on how it seemed endless and fleeting at once. In his hand, he held a folded piece of paper. It wasn't Emily's letter this time. It was a note Sophia had left him earlier that morning, taped to the fridge before heading to her summer internship interview. "You always say I'm brave," it read, "but I think I got that from you. Love you, Dad." He smiled as he read it again. His eyes stung, but he didn't wipe them. He sat in the silence for a few more minutes, thinking, feeling, breathing. Then the voice in his head began, soft and certain. "I spent my life chasing roles. On screen, on stage, in stories other people wrote. But the most important role of my life found me. It didn't come with a script or a spotlight. It didn't come with applause. It came with a whisper on a phone, a name I didn't know I'd given, a daughter I'd never met, and love, unexpected, undeserved, but real. He leaned back and let the sun warm his face. When I was younger, I thought time was something you fought, something you had to beat before it ran out. But now I know, time isn't the enemy. Silence is. The silence between what we feel and what we say. The silence between regret and forgiveness. The silence that keeps us from saying, "I'm sorry," or "I love you," or "come back." He took a breath and looked down at the lake again. Emily taught me that silence isn't emptiness. It's a space, a doorway. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to step through it, we find what we didn't even know we were missing. Footsteps approached behind him. Light? Familiar? He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Hey," Sophia called gently from behind. He turned, smiled. "Hey, kiddo." She motioned with her head toward the pathway. "You coming?" He stood, stretching slightly as he rose from the bench. He slipped the note into his coat pocket and joined her. They began walking, side by side, into the golden edge of the evening. No big words, no declarations. Just two people who had lost everything they thought defined them, and found something deeper. Family, connection, a second chance, and the courage to hold on to it. They walked slowly, following the curved path that traced the water's edge. Sophia's hands were tucked into the sleeves of her jacket, and Keanu's steps fell in rhythm with hers. Birds skimmed across the water as the sun dipped lower, painting the lake in soft pinks and amber golds. Keanu glanced over at her, watching how the light touched her face. There were traces of Emily there. Her quiet strength, the thoughtful curve of her mouth, the way she tilted her head when listening. But there was also something entirely her own. A light that came from within, born of all she had endured. He thought of the night he met Emily. A bookstore, a smile, a photograph that made him feel seen. He thought of the letters he wrote that never reached her and the years lost in between. He thought of how a single call in the middle of the night had rewritten everything. Not all stories get second acts, but some do. Sometimes, love waits in the margins, patient and unspoken, until it's called back into the light. Sophia bumped his shoulder gently. "You always get quiet before you say something important." He grinned. "I guess I'm still learning how to talk." "You're doing better," she said. "You show up." Keanu nodded. "That's what matters." They reached the edge of the park, where a wooden archway marked the end of the trail. Beyond it, the city stretched upward, bright and alive, full of noise and new beginnings. Sophia turned to him. "Do you miss it?" He didn't need to ask what she meant. Hollywood, scripts, cameras. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not the way I thought I would." "Will you go back?" "Maybe," he said, "if the right story finds me." She smiled. "Or maybe you'll write your own." He raised an eyebrow. "Now that would be something." They stood there a moment longer. The air was crisp now, tinged with the first breath of fall. Sophia slipped her arm through his. "Let's go home," she said. Keanu nodded, and together they stepped out of the park and into the streetlight glow. Behind them, the lake rippled gently in the dark, the stars beginning to appear one by one. And with that, their new story continued. Not perfect, not planned, but real. Written in small steps, shared glances, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken to be known. Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least deserve it. The question is, would you take it? Would you answer a call from your past if it changed everything? Because sometimes the most extraordinary chapters begin with the words, "Hello again." If you've ever reconnected with someone from your past in a way that changed your life forever, tell us in the comments. We want to hear your story. And if you believe in second chances, family, and love that defies time itself. Subscribe now for more incredible stories just like this one.